Throughout the week, we've been focusing on the latest developments at the damaged Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan and the impact on the nuclear industry here in the U.S. and, of course, all over the world. We've heard from the heads of power companies and a former NRC commissioner and a former U.S. Energy Secretary. Now we turn to a scientist who specializes in nuclear plant design. Edwin Lyman is a senior scientist at the Union of Concerned Scientists, a nonprofit organization focused on climate change and related issues. He's recently testified before Congress on events in Japan, and for more than a week, he's been taking part in daily briefings with the press about the latest developments involving the Fukushima plant. So you have a lot on your plate. You are a very busy man. We appreciate you spending some time, taking out some time for us. Let me ask you first, Ed, about the situation in Japan. It looked like, or at least it felt like, maybe because of less press coverage, that it was getting better. Now we hear last night that they're moving up their alert rate, and we're concerned that one of the reactor vessels may have been breached.
Well, it's clear that the situation has been very serious all along. And while they made some progress in restoring off-site power and trying to energize some parts of the plant, the cores of 3 reactors are still badly damaged, and it's not clear that core cooling can actually be restored to the extent that it will cause the situation to be resolved without more radiological release.
What about the danger to the people there? I mean, the Japanese are now saying there is a voluntary expansion of the evacuation zone out to almost 20 miles from 12. The U.S. government is saying don't be 50 miles from the plant. What's safe? Where should people be?
Well, right now it looks like there should have been a larger mandatory evacuation for the Japanese, because there are dose rates that go beyond that 12-mile zone, which I think are of serious health concern. So the U.S., I think, called it right. However, back here at home, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission only requires 10-mile emergency planning zones around nuclear plants, and I think that distance is going to have to be rethought.
What kind of results are we going to see? What kind of fallout are we going to see from this? Will people die sooner? Will cancer rates rise? Is anyone going to feel direct effects, for example, workers at the plant?
Well, it does look like there is significant radiation exposure among some workers at the plant, and I don't think we're getting all the information about those levels. There are certainly radiation injuries that are taking place. Whether or not there'll be fatalities from radiation exposure is too early to tell, but the radiation levels are very worrisome, and so is the way in which the Japanese are protecting those workers. There are serious problems there, too. Among the public, sorry.
No. Well, you know what? I wanted to kind of bring it back home, Ed, and ask what can we learn from this? Because if some sort of black swan event or an event for which we're not prepared or don't expect happens to a nuclear reactor near a major city in the U.S., we could look at the same kind of problems here. It could be even worse. What do we do about that?
Well, that's absolutely right. That is a little secret that the industry didn't want Americans to know, is that nuclear power plants are vulnerable to the kind of catastrophe we're now seeing in Japan. And the only way to deal with that is to make sure we have measures in place to prevent such an accident from happening to the greatest extent possible. Recently, the industry has relied more on mitigation, saying even if it happened, we'd be able to cope with it. Well, we see how well that's working in Japan right now. They can't cope with it, so we need to rely more on prevention these days.
I hear a lot about we need to add safety measures. I hear a lot of people saying we have no choice but to go forward with nuclear. I have yet to be explained why we have no choice. If you want to prevent a disaster from happening to the utmost, then you would, I guess, shut down plants and stop using nuclear power. Why is that option off the table?
Well, we don't support blanket statements in either direction. We keep an open mind about any energy option that could potentially help to mitigate climate change. But nuclear is special, and I think everyone, the industry and the public, have to realize that if nuclear power is going to be an option at all, it has to have a level of safety and security that will preclude the kind of disaster we're seeing in Japan, because clearly that has shaken up the nuclear industry around the world. Countries like Germany, Switzerland, even China are reconsidering their plans for nuclear development. And so it's clear the industry can't survive too many more events like this. So it's in everyone's interest to make sure nuclear plants are safe.
How can we make sure, though, Ed, that they're safe enough that we're not affected by an event for which we're not prepared or an event that we do not expect? Isn't that really the problem?
That is a big part of the problem, and the fact is that complacency is set in among regulators in the industry. Since there hadn't been a serious accident since Chernobyl and before that 3 Mile Island, I think everyone sort of forgot how bad these accidents can be. But now we have to appreciate the fact that we need to think about expanding the range of events that we need to protect against and making sure that if something like that happens, that we have plans in place that are credible for actually dealing with them. That means actually considering the kind of radiation exposures that workers will get in mitigating this accident, making sure that equipment you have available will actually can be brought to the site and will work under those conditions. These are things the U.S. doesn't have right now because they don't consider these accidents to be so credible that you actually have to spend a lot of money worrying about them. Well, we think that has to change. They're going to have to spend more time and money worrying about remote or low probability accidents that may not be as remote as we thought they were.
I do want to point out that other sources of energy also have their dangers. Thousands of people die every year because of coal, for example, and breathing in small particles being affected by that. Of course, climate change, a lot of people are concerned, could really change the way people on the Earth live in the future. What do you suggest? What does the Union of Concerned Scientists suggest we do as far as serving our energy needs?
Well, UCS believes that there is a portfolio, including an array of renewable technologies as well as efficiency, that can achieve climate goals, at least in the next few decades, without excessively relying on nuclear power. But I do think that nuclear is special, and it's also extremely expensive. It's certainly not the cheapest way to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions because of the very high cost of nuclear power plants. Now, if safety standards increase, as we believe they should, that's going to make nuclear power even less affordable than it already is. And so it's really going to be a societal choice whether or not to buy expensive and potentially dangerous nuclear power or support lower cost renewable options that may not have these risks.
All right. Hey, Ed, thanks very much. Ed Lyman of the Union of Concerned Scientists, a very busy group right now. We appreciate you making some time for us. Coming up.